Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us during Eco3 Earth Week, which is a week-long celebration of our community's commitment to sustainability with a lineup of events, learning, and service. Each day this week, we'll be leading a series of virtual webinars, each focusing on different actions for climate resiliency, including actions for businesses, environmental justice, solar, and climate throughout our community. Each of these items are outlined as important actions in the Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan. Today, we are joined by some community leaders who are working diligently to bring solar power to Duluth. Bret Pence from Minnesota Interfaith Power Light will speak about how people are coming together for group solar buys and barriers to solar access. Peter Lindstrom from Clean Energy Resources Teams will speak about advancing solar on schools statewide. And Alex Jackson, Energy Coordinator at the City of Duluth, will speak about local efforts to put solar on Duluth school buildings and surrounding community areas. So thank you to our speakers for being with us today. We want to also thank our sponsors and partners for Earth Week and for their dedication to an equitable and sustainable future. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to drop it in the chat. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Jodi, I will pass it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Excited to have all of you here today. We're going to actually start by looking at solar in schools as one of the new tools that are available for adding solar in our community. And some really cool opportunities there. And so I'd like to welcome Peter Lindstrom. He is the Public Sector and Community Engagement Manager for the Clean Energy Resource Teams that has been working on a number of programs and engagements, and is kind of the state's Solar on Schools specialist. And glad to have you here. Peter also brings a perspective of not only doing 20 plus years of policy work, but he's actually also been an elected official. And so when he talks about all of the different things that we need to do to make things happen, he can bring a couple of different lenses to us. So welcome, Peter. We can see your presentation. Looks like you're about to start it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jodi, and thank you for having me. I'm super thrilled to be here, and I'm a huge fan of all of the great work that you do in your area, and I'm excited to be talking about solar schools this afternoon. You're right, it's an exciting topic, and I never pass up an opportunity whenever I'm talking about solar to sneak in a little message about efficiency first. It's not quite the razzle dazzle that solar is, or the shiny diamond that solar is, but it is, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit, so critically important for our schools and our public buildings, and all buildings, as a matter of fact. So I always encourage folks to do benchmarking, whether that's through B3 benchmarking or energy portfolio manager, and get an energy audit. There's great opportunities for schools, for all buildings, to get free energy audits, whether that is through your utility or through an organization called RETAP, Retired Environmental Technical Assistance Program, provides free energy audits throughout Minnesota. So that's exciting. You can't manage what you don't measure. So that is my my first message to all of you. And of course, there's a lot of low cost, no cost things that schools can do right from the get-go. But let's talk solar. So why schools and why solar? Well, first and foremost, the schools that do have solar arrays are finding that there's a real clear connection to their education curriculum, and they build it right into their STEM, science, technology, engineering, math curriculum. it's something that you can see every day, you can feel it, you can examine an inverter, you can look at the data that's being kicked out that the solar array is producing, and use that in your curriculum. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I like to think that today's youth will be making tomorrow's energy choices. So whether that's choices around energy technologies or energy public policy or clean energy jobs, which, by the way, I just heard this statistic not too long ago. The Bureau of Labor Statistics from the feds said that solar jobs are going to be increasing about 63% in the next decade. That's far faster than most occupations. And then schools are making this choice because of financial stability. I've learned that utilities are, generally speaking, about the second highest expense for a school, right behind personnel. Utilities are the second highest expense. And so with the dramatic decrease in the cost of solar, as well as some innovative financing options, schools are finding this choice a lot easier. And I'd say the vast majority of schools are moving forward with solar using what's called a third-party ownership arrangement. That's where there's no or little upfront cost to the school, and the school enters into an agreement, what's called a power purchase agreement, with a third-party corporation for a set period of time. Typically, it's 20 years or so, and that third party takes advantage of the tax credits and other tax benefits. Clearly, there are environmental and health benefits as well. It's estimated that solar on schools nationally offset an estimated 1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide every single year. 1 million tons. That is, I'm told, the equivalent of GHG greenhouse gas emissions of about 200,000 cars. So just imagine taking 200,000 cars off the road. And more schools are building it into their emergency response and resilience. Schools are often the designated community shelter. So if you're able to incorporate solar and storage, which energy storage, which we are seeing more schools do, then that can be a key benefit as well. So those are the top 4 benefits that I see why schools are heading in this direction. And there's a lot of schools that are doing this. There's a really great report put out a few years ago, national report put out by a group called Generation 180, called Brighter Future. And according to this report, there are over 7,000 schools across the nation that have a solar installation. They first put out this report in 2014, and then they redid it just last year. It showed an 81% increase in the number of schools in that time, 2014 to last year. 81% increase in schools that have this. So just today, there are 250,000 students, roughly, that are going to a school with solar on the ground or on the roof. So that's really exciting. In Minnesota, we have our fair share of solar on schools as well, and more on the way. We have a grand total of 336 school districts. About 40 or so, maybe closer to 50 now, have some solar. Those are districts. So about 160, give or take, sites school sites that have some solar, including in Duluth. You have a very, very teeny tiny solar array, like one or 2 kilowatts on Lowell Elementary School. And so this map, which is on our CERT's website, shows which districts, the ones that are in that the red color, reddish color, have solar in their districts, and then the yellow are districts that have subscribed to community solar gardens, and then I believe the orange have both CSG subscriptions, community solar garden subscriptions, and have solar on site. So there's a fair amount of schools that have done this already, and many more on the way, which I'll talk about in a second. And there's just a ton of interest out there. And this is just a few emails I pulled in the last few months or so from teachers, from students, from administrators, from interested parents. They have an interest to do this, but they have a lot of questions about how to make it happen. The good news is, so finances, even though that price has dropped pretty dramatically in the last decade or so, finding the funds to do this is certainly a barrier. And so the legislature recognized this, and last legislative session, they passed a bill allocating $16 million to Minnesota schools as grants for solar on schools, for schools. And so this is super exciting. There's two different grant programs. One is for schools within Excel territory, and one is for schools everywhere else. So $8 million for schools within Excel territory, $8 million for schools everywhere else. Excel will be rolling out their program in the next week or so. And the Department of Commerce, which administers the Everywhere Else grant program, has already rolled out their program and has seen some very impressive results statewide so far. So we have 80 schools have been pre-qualified. That's what they need to do through this grant program. They get pre-qualified first, and 45 districts, including a number, kind of that 35, I-35 corridor up towards Duluth. Unfortunately, none within Duluth, but districts close by have been pre-qualified. In fact, almost every district. Let's see if I can remember them off the top of my head. Moose Lake, Esco, Proctor, Hermantown are all applying, or all have already applied for these. Well, there they are. They're right on the screen. I don't have to remember them. They're right there. There they are. They're right there on the screen. So that's very exciting. And so it's good news, and also bad news in the sense that there's been so much interest that this first round of funding, it could be that all of the money has been utilized. Now, there is a bill in the legislature recognizing this and allocating about $3 million more for additional funds, but that's still in the works, and nothing we can count on at this point. I love this example. I'm just going to cover a couple examples. You can have huge arrays that go wall to wall on your school, and that's wonderful, either ground mount or on the roof. Or you could just have these more STEM focused arrays. This one's about roughly 10 kW or so in Morris. And this is the Robotics Club, the Plaid Pillagers in Morris. And they're always they're always looking for money every single year to build these 100-pound robots and go to competitions all across the state. And they're just scrambling for cash to make this happen. And the coach for the robotics club in Morris went to Germany as part of an exchange program, saw all these schools over there that had solar and all the benefits. And he said, well, why can't we do that in Morris? He went to the school board, got the kids all excited about it first, went to the school board and said, hey, if we can find the cash to build a solar array, can we use the savings can the savings be allocated to the robotics club every year? School board is like, hey, absolutely. If you can find $30,000 to make it happen, go for it. And that's what they did. They received a few grants. They got their utility on board, who was excited about it, and provided some funds. And indeed, they're saving about $1,000 a year. That's all being allocated to the robotics club. And you can see these kids are pretty darn excited about it. Likewise, in Chisago Lakes Public Schools, they've been really heavily invested in solar for, gosh, going on a decade now. Between community solar garden subscriptions and a number of on-site solar arrays, they anticipate saving several $1 million, $2 to $3 million for their school district. And I do like this quote from one of the teachers who led the effort about how it is a great tool for students. So you may be thinking, well, this is all great, but I still have questions about how to make this happen and where to start. And I would say there's a few things that come to mind. First is encouraging or finding who those champions are in your area, be they teachers or students or parents. Certainly district staff need to be involved, and they can be champions as well. Facilities people, finance people, or community members. Who else out there shares your passion? And many schools or communities may have green teams or sustainability teams, task forces. Those are always great places to start, and invite those decision makers to be a part of the conversation, to be at the table. School board members, superintendent, facilities people, finance people, all of those folks need to be part of the conversation. Get an energy audit, get a good understanding of where you use your energy and what your solar potential is. There's some free tools that you can use to see how much sunshine your elementary school roof is getting, for example. And then financing, can't forget about that. I mentioned this third-party financing mechanism. You can learn about what that is all about, or the benefits of a cash option as well. Identifying hurdles. There's certainly hurdles that are out there, and do your research into local policies around permitting, for example, or how your utility feels about this, or what sort of incentives might be out there. Select a developer, and CERTS has some tools to help folks, help districts do procurement, and then you're off and running. So how can CERTS help? What can CERTS do? We have a mantra of good, better, best. It's good if a school puts on say a 100 kW solar array on top of that elementary school. It's better if they put that solar array up and then they share their story and really let the broader community know that they've done this and why they're doing this and what the benefits are. And then it's best if they put that solar array up there, they tell their story, and then they really integrate it into their curriculum. And there's some great free tools to help schools do that. And they really empower their students. And I always point school districts to groups like Youth Eco Solutions is a fantastic Minnesota-based group. Minnesota Renewable Energy Society has some really innovative youth programming, and others that are out there that are ready, willing to step into the classroom and help integrate the array into the curriculum. So with that, that's me, and that's my contact information. There's a lot of great information on our website, which I encourage you to check out, and give me a holler anytime. We're here to help, and whether that's with the grant funding or anything, we're ready and willing to lend a hand. Thanks so much for inviting me. Happy to take questions when we get to that point.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate kind of how you set them up, and now we're going to knock them down, because our next presenter is exactly one of those energy champions. Alex Jackson is with the City of Duluth as their energy coordinator, and he's actually going to be wearing two different hats here today. He'll give us a little glimpse as to what's happening with the city, but he's really here to tell the story of some of those champions and what has been happening, for example, in this region and with the Duluth School District, looking at students, teachers, champions, wanting to move solar on schools forward. And so I think we're going to start with that community champion hat and turn it over to Alex.
Thank you very much, Jodi. That's going to be tough to follow, so thank you, Peter. Appreciate you setting me up like that. But I'm going to actually start. I appreciated the slide from Morris, Peter, because where I'd like to start today. Well, I guess I'll introduce myself first. Like Jodi said, I'm Alex Jackson. I'm the energy coordinator with the City of Duluth, and my primary responsibility within the city is tracking and all of the city's utility use, and then developing projects and strategies to reduce our energy use or utility use, and through that, our carbon footprint. So that is me, and I'll throw some contact information and stuff on the chat after I'm done talking. So if you have further questions that we don't get to, you can reach out to me. But going back to Morris, Peter threw up that the picture of the Morris group and brought up Eric Buchanan and his participation in climate smart municipalities. In 2016, the Institute on the Environment had a grant opportunity that the City of Duluth participated in as well, essentially, and it was a 3-year program for doing a learning and work exchange with the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. The City of Duluth applied for and was lucky enough to participate in that. And after the exchange of the first year, one of the things that we kind of identified as a whole group was how, in seeing what we saw in Zarbeck and what probably planted some of the seeds for Eric down in Morris, was how can we get students involved, and what is the best avenue to get students involved. In Duluth, we chose to ask a 6th grade math and science teacher to start a local climate club at Ordine East Middle School. And that started out really well. With that group, there was a bunch of participants. I think we started in year one. We had about 10 or 12. This year, I think we were up to about 45 or 50, and it expands now with students at Ordine East Middle School, at East High School, some planting the seeds and introduction for Denfeld High School this year, with the hopes that we can get Denfeld and then Lincoln Park Middle School involved as well. How we started that group, we talked about, with that group, we talked about what do you want to do, and solar was something that the group identified. So like Peter said, he talked about being as efficient as you can, so you're using less solar. Well, Duluth schools did a pretty good job through the RED plan of making a lot of our buildings pretty efficient with LED lighting, different building controls, and high quality HVAC. So at Ordine, they did the calculations, they picked the space at Ordine, the students chose the gymnasium, and we did all of the energy calculations, or they did them really. I kind of stood in the background and pointed them in the right direction. But their advisor and the group really took the ball from there. And they did the energy calculations for the gymnasium, and then put together a presentation for the school board, asking for permission to raise money to put about a 45 kW or 35 kW system on the gymnasium at Ordine East Middle School. Unfortunately, they didn't get permission to do that, but that did not deter the group. In fact, that really only made them more resilient, and I think it's fair to say that they felt ignored and dismissed, which really added a lot of fire to their passion and drive to try to get something going at Ordine. So we went, or they went back to kind of the ground, back to basics, worked with Mindy Granley and a group of students up at UMD who kind of took it a whole step further. And this group at UMD did a study on the solar capacity for all of Duluth public schools. And then I'm going to mess up the time frame some, but we're going to then kind of jump ahead to COVID, and things really slowed down a little bit with distance learning and so on. But one of the things that didn't slow down was their passion. And I think leading into the solar on schools, this group presented their presentation to Senator David Senjum from Rochester, who is a big advocate of renewables and a big advocate for the solar on schools program, who I was actually on a meeting with this morning, and he assured us all that there was going to be more money next year, Peter. So we can hopefully that all pans out. Leading up to this legislation, this group, and the teacher is Tanya Jackson, who is the advisor for that program. So connect the dots or don't. We'll leave that up to you guys. But that student group, Mrs. Jackson and her students, were very active in writing letters, sending emails, presenting to whatever representatives or state representatives or state senators that would listen, along with Tanya and one of her students spoke at a committee meeting, a committee hearing, to get that out, to get the solar on schools out of committee and into onto the floor as a whole. So this group has been really, really active in advocating for solar in Duluth and on our schools here in Duluth. I see I'm just about out of time, so I will kind of finish it up with saying that you know, there is in Duluth specifically, there is a immense amount of knowledge and drive by our students. There is a lot of capacity, immense amount of capacity on school buildings and school property to really put, really probably be leaders in the state, if not the country, if there's the financial will. And so I would, I'll also throw in the chat the name and the contact information for that school advisor. And if you have questions or want to hear more about their story and what they're working on, if you reach out to her, I know she will be happy to get back to you and engage in some conversations. And she can speak far better to what is the next, you know, the best step or the next best step to help support that group moving forward. So yeah, that's a little bit about that group and how they got there. As far as in the city goes, you know, the person to speak best to the bigger picture is Mindy Granley, who a few years ago, when I mentioned her earlier, was at the University of Minnesota Duluth. She's now the sustainability officer for the City of Duluth, which has been a great steal for us. From a facilities standpoint, I will say that when we have, when we're making improvements, we're always looking to become as efficient and reduce our energy load as much as we can. We seldomly have enough money to do the project as well as we want, which would include solar on most of our buildings. So our kind of bare minimum is when we go in and we're making these kind of improvements, as we're setting, we also set the foundation structurally and within the electrical system, so that when we have, when we find that pot of money or the money tree, so to speak, these facilities are ready to take renewables or solar as efficiently, as cost effectively as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for that. Absolutely a champion, and we'll get that contact information into the chat. I do know that the city is trying to find some of those resources, et cetera. And when we get into questions, I know I got a couple for you. So we'll jump into our final presentation first. I will invite everyone to put your questions in the chat for all of our presenters. But we'll move on to Bret Pence. I kind of just consider him like the solar dude in Duluth. And that comes from Bret was the project leader actually for a project years ago. I think it's got to be at least 6-7 decades. Time is just kind of crazy with the pandemic, but started doing some of the work in Duluth with the Department of Energy, really with a goal to get that first megawatt installed. And so that was looking at residential, it was looking at commercial, it was looking at governmental, institutional, looking at things like utility scale, solar gardens, et cetera. So he is do they call it OG? I'm not that cool. The greatest of all time, or the original gangster, or something like that for solar here in Duluth, Minnesota. Can we hear it all for Bret Pence?
Oh my gosh. How to follow that? Thank you so much. I don't think I've ever had an opening like that before. And I can't rap, so I'm not sure I can live up to all those titles, but it's just a pleasure and a blessing to be here with you, Jodi, and I'm always love to be back with my compatriots at Equilibrium 3. I miss you. Happy to be here with you virtually. Also really delighted to be here with Peter and Alex, who have been consistent champions on solar for so long. So thank you too. I'm going to share screen right now and get to my slides. So just forgive me for a second here. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk just a little bit about whom I work for now, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. I'll connect that a little bit to solar and why we work in that space and how we see solar. And then I thought I'd zoom out a little bit. We've talked about a great solution that the state has really brought on board, which is solar on schools. We've also talked even deeper into that conversation about how that has played out in Duluth and what we're doing in the city. And I'm going to kind of zoom back a little bit on solar and talk about what are some of the access issues and workarounds we have with solar, how they might apply within Duluth, how we're working on them, at least through my organization. And then I'll talk about one of those solutions more deeply, which is how we operate in Duluth most frequently on solar, which is in solar group buys on residential homes. So this is our mission statement for Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We work with the faith communities on the issue of climate change in particular. I think that the key thing I want to draw out from this, not to spend too much time about the organization I work for right now, is just that we do see social justice wrapped up with climate. You cannot separate the two. That injustice is caused by the issue of climate change, and also injustices were a cause. One of the reasons climate change has happened, it is at the foundation of why it is occurring from our point of view. So justice then, to work for justice, is a climate solution, as much as a moral reason to go about your life. So that's just one. I just wanted to share that about why we're in this work. One of the ways one of the ways you could say that we have that manifests within our work is something like the Just Solar Coalition. That's something we founded a long time ago. Again, solar is an excellent technical solution to the climate crisis, in terms of reducing our emissions, which are at the heart of why technically climate change is happening right now. But also, if you're going to do that technical solution, let's see if you can load some values into that as well, just like fair trade coffee. Let's load some values into that and address some of these justice issues, which again we think are at the root also of why climate change is happening. So that can be manifest in like workforce development, local manufacturing, customer protections, in all kinds of ways. And access is also a huge part of that, because one of the key problems, and I think we were finding out about this through solar on schools, is that when you put solar at a location, you are paying for all of your electric bills at once. There's an upfront capital problem. You have to come forward with that capital, then you can save money over time. But there is that, if you don't have that capital, you can't access it. So that is the key issue in terms of access. really of all these solutions that we'll be talking about. And you know, with Solar for Schools, we had the state has come in to put forward some of that capital, which has been great. Let's see if I can advance here. Excuse me. Okay, so then the next, well, I'm just going to go through some of the workarounds, you know, on access. You know, how do we get through that capital problem, that kind of barrier towards of so much capital? And one of the ways you can do that is community solar. Now, community solar is when you build solar in one location and allow people to buy portions of that and then be credited back on their bill. So it would look like you have solar on your house on your bill, but in actuality, you're buying a small portion of a larger array. That spreads out the capital costs of that project so that you're not paying for all the labor. If you pay for solar at your own home, you're paying for all the labor, all the hard components like the racking and all the structural analysis has to go into that. All that's done for you, and when you buy a few panels there, you know, you're spreading the cost of that out between all the other participants. So it's a great way to do that. And Peter talked about Solar for Schools as an option that some school districts have community solar as a way that some school districts have moved towards solar. But if we looked at those regions about who can participate in community solar, we see it's really in the state of Minnesota, very, very much tied to a utility, one utility in particular, Xcel, which is an investor-owned utility, which serves Twin Cities Metro and other associated out regions within western and southern Minnesota. And that's because it's legislated to do that. But there was a law passed in 2013 that mandates that Xcel offer a program, that it has to be hooked up to the grid. You know, if a third-party developer puts that out there, and then that they have to offer them a certain price for that electricity that they're going to produce, and that's made projects move. And we have one of the nation-leading programs on community solar in the state of Minnesota. We're the recognized leader in the country in terms of community solar. But unfortunately, we have two Minnesotas. We don't have one Minnesota in terms of community solar. We have the Xcel program. We have the rest of the state, which is not legally mandated to have it. So we have very limited access to that. In fact, in our utility, Minnesota Power, has the option to offer it. They have offered one particular program, one offering. They have 1 megawatt of approximately of community solar. The city has bought into that, and also UMD. So it actually has helped with solar on schools up here in some ways, but they haven't offered any more. And that's just, they have the power to do that. So we have 1/100th of these, if you account for population of being served, we have 1/100th of the community solar available to us in Minnesota Power service region as Xcel. So that is a huge barrier, of course, and it's also a tool. So if that changes, that legislation changes, or the attitude of our utility in this region changes, that could be a good way to address some of the issues that come with access. Sorry, it's skipping ahead a little bit for me, but there are other workarounds. So that pathway was closed to us as an organization. We worked hard on community solar in the Xcel region, but up here we couldn't do that. So we were forced to look for other ways to address community solar. And another way you can do that is try to place solar on organizations that are serving your community. And we particularly looked at nonprofits. Nonprofits are, Eco. This is the project I have up here right now, is a project that we worked on at Equilibrium 3 and Minnesota Interfaith Power Light, where I work now, and with Real, which is a nonprofit solar developer. And this was a project that went up on the American Indian Community Housing Organization here in town. If you've driven by 2nd Street, you've seen it, and that might be more familiar to you. That is a great large mural, and right underneath that mural, which you can't see if you're driving by on 2nd Street, is this solar array. And so helping an organization like this put solar on their building helps them serve the community, and then helps us deploy solar in a community way. There are lots of barriers to nonprofits actually doing this. The biggest one is, again, that upfront capital cost. And also the fact that most of the incentives, particularly the federal incentives in the United States, are geared towards business. Some towards residential owners, but a larger portion of solar incentives are geared towards business. So if you're a nonprofit and you don't have a tax, you have tax-free status, and you're not, you don't have a tax burden you're carrying, then you can't access those credits. And so solar is effectively 30, 40, 50, even 60% more expensive for you than it would be for a business. So we try to help them in terms of try to mitigate those costs through raising funds or finding them different funds, lowering the cost of the solar. And we're active with that with all kinds of nonprofits, but particularly profits that serve low-income populations. And I'll talk about that a bit next. Schools are great. In the past, we've worked with not-for-profit schools or charter schools that were a little more open-minded on this. And now that we have this state program, it's fantastic. We're seeing that burden out. So we may just, we can just point people to Peter and say, hey, go talk to Peter about that. And places of, organizations of faith where, our organizational roots are. We try and help, a church or a mosque put solar up on it, use that as a something that they can use to help fulfill their mission better. Okay, I'll stay on this slide just a second more because I do want to say that another area that's just a really difficult area to broach in terms of a barrier on solar is low income. And how would you get solar to low income folks? These are folks without much capital. They don't have spare time. They're trying to just figure out how to make it through the day and to the next paycheck. They don't have spare time to really assess bids if they had the money for that. So how do we get them the benefits of solar? Because these are the folks that most need it. These are folks with a high energy burden, meaning they have a higher percentage of their income is devoted towards utilities. They're the least able to adapt to climate change issues when they be flooding or droughts or really anything you can think of. They just don't have the resources to adapt that someone with more income does. So we really want to focus on trying to get solar to the benefits of solar to directly assist these populations, and working with nonprofits that help, that their mission of ECO is to assist low income and at-risk populations through their own cultural context. So when we put solar up on a place like this, we are directly assisting low income folks through their mission. They also have apartments on site too, which are right behind that mural. So there are people actually living and taking advantage of the solar benefits as well at that site. And then finally, one of the workarounds is just to, as we become more knowledgeable about solar and we work in this space, just like Peter or Alex, we try to share our knowledge and just more broadly share that with any groups that are really looking for solar as a solution. That can be a for-profit business. We're working with the Whole Foods Co-op right now for a solar array they're putting up here and one I put up in West Duluth. It can be even a utility, and this is a great picture of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, last fall, and a solar array that they put up. We did very little assistance here. They've done, to be honest, they've done almost all the work. But we did come in at one key point when they said, we want to put up community solar. We don't know how to do it in our context without it costing people a lot of money. And all we were able to do was say, have you considered a battery on site? Have you considered that? And here's a consultant that we know works with other municipal and utilities and co-ops around the country that does solar and battery installations. And when they factored in a battery, then all of a sudden this array became cheaper. It made energy cheaper for everyone that were ratepayers, with their municipal utility, which means that then it became a solution for low income customers as well. Everyone's rates went down with the addition of storage with the solar. So we did very, very little there. I'm proud of the little part we played. And if you're interested in that project, they have their ribbon cutting is on May 3rd, and I posted it in the chat. Okay, so a final workaround just to mention is the topic that I think Jodi really wanted me to talk about, and that is solar group buys. So before we get into that, this is just how residential solar works, and I think I think most people know that solar is a community asset anyway. The sun shines on all of us, or doesn't, and if you live in Duluth and it's a cloudy day. And so we all benefit from it, right? And when you produce electricity from the sun, and if your house is hooked up to the grid, you are participating in a community activity. This slide does a good job of showing what happens when energy is produced on your house. Then it goes to serve your loads in your house, like your washing machine or your dishwasher. But then if it's served all those loads and there's still extra energy, it goes out to the grid. And many people have this idea that it just goes back out to some central location, and then the utility is going to redirect it somewhere. And no, what actually happened, electrons don't care about any of that. They don't care about your politics. They don't care about what you had for supper. They just go to the next load. The electrons are just going to the next load. And so this is going to go to the, it's just going to follow the distribution lines to the closest load. That's your neighbor's house, typically. So when you put up solar on a house, you are participating in a community project. Your leftover solar is serving other loads right in your neighborhood. So it makes sense to think of community solar as something that just happens with solar, and then to really lean into that with residential group buy. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So how did we get into a what's that?
About 3 minutes, so we have a couple of minutes for questions.
Okay, I'm gonna go a little faster then. Thank you, Jodi. So we played around with solar quite a bit as an organization on group buys. We worked locally for a while in Duluth. We then found a national partner, Solar United Neighbors, we started working with in 2021. And basically what a solar group buy is you educate people. As you educate them, you see if people want to combine their buying power and then collectively bargain to get a single installer. And by doing that, you save money. Everyone saves money on installation, because that installer, instead of negotiating on one project with one customer, is negotiating on 20 projects at once, or 30 or 50. And you get a bulk rate, just like buying in bulk at the grocery store. So there's those costs. You also get support through the process because there are so many questions, and you get to be part of a movement, and you get to you get the fellowship of being with other people going through that process. Here's that process again: phase 1, which is outreach and education; phase 2, which is kind of selecting the installer. And again, you could put those values I've talked about in terms of that, when you do that selection. And then finally would be the installation process, which takes multiple months with lots of questions. And if you are working with a group like Solar United Neighbors or ourselves, you can see that that would help you with, they can intervene on your behalf with the installer. These are just some of those values that you can pick through an installer. And I will say, being involved with this process, I've seen us move the market here towards more installers, and more installers having certain certifications or licensures which they're not required to have, but we want them to have, or we won't consider them, as installers that would be eligible for consideration. And then in 2 areas, I've been real pleased thus far with our solar group buy that we've worked on with Solar United Neighbors. One is that we've really spread out geographically. Last year we had 5 counties. I think we'll have 7 counties in participation this year. Last year over 30 projects. And if you live in rural Lake County, it's really hard to get any solar installer just to come to your house if you're just calling them on your own, because it's really expensive for an installer to drive out. They may look at your house remotely, but it's very difficult to get them to come out and do a competitive bid. Now, when we talk to an installer, we say, we'll give you 30 homes, but everyone gets the same price. So automatically, these projects that were really expensive in rural Minnesota become more affordable. And then we tap into low-income programs like Minnesota Power's low-income solar program. And what has this done? Last year we did almost 30 homes at this program. We had 5 counties. We had over 200 kilowatts deployed of solar. That would be the equivalent of about 5 times the amount you see at Rice Lake and Arrowhead Road in Duluth, if you drive by that installation. And then we served 9 low to moderate income households throughout that area. 3 of those homes that were the low income homes, we totally subsidized their arrays. Most of that was with grant money from the low income program for Minnesota Power. And then 6 moderate income homes, we partially subsidized with our own money that we're bringing to the table that we raised. So I hope to almost double this year in 2022. And I think we're on track towards doing that. So it's a great solution in terms of trying to work around some of those barriers and then add those values that we think are critical. And I want to thank you, and I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Bret. What we're going to do is I'm going to throw one question out to all of you. And then Kristen's going to kind of end the formal presentation here. And if anybody's able to stick around for additional chat, we'd invite you to do that. The question that I have, and feel free for our panelists to pop in, whoever wants to answer it first, is if you had one wish, if there's one thing that you would like to see happen to move solar forward in this community, or the projects that you care about in this community or in the state, what's that one missing link that you think we should be jointly advocating to make happen?
Jodi, I'll take a swing at this one first, if that's okay. So speaking as a city employee, I think public participation. And I would imagine that if Tanya was available today, she would probably say the same thing, as if this is a priority, the budgets that I have to work with and all of us have to work with at the city, or even in, I would imagine the school district, are very limited. And so if this is a priority, go to city council meetings, go to school board meetings, engage with those administrations, those administrators, and tell them that that is a priority, and encourage them to find a way to fund it.
I'll double down on that one. Alex, you stole my answer. So I'll just build upon that. And Jodi, you mentioned at the outset that I, for 20 years, served as an elected official. So I can speak firsthand that it is really hard to say no to a bunch of kids that file into City Hall or the school board meeting and ask for support for something. Alex, you gave an example where it's not impossible, where the school board says no, but that sort of public gentle pressure, the letters of support, the meetings, the hearings. First of all, it's a great educational opportunity for the students on how the sausage is made, but it's very effective as well. So I would say that's a great starting point for anybody thinking about this.
It is. And unfortunately, for like in Duluth, two school district administrations have told them no. And the first one that asked was just to fundraise, which is mind boggling. So I hope people participating will start attending school board meetings and asking administrators how come they're not fully supporting these students and their education and their wishes. If it wasn't for the students, none of them would be there.
There you go. Education would be much easier if you didn't have students. What's your final word of wisdom here? What do you want?
Can I triple down? Can I triple down? I'll triple down. I don't know. I just posted in the chat. We have a meeting with Senator Tina Smith on Tuesday, and it's about this issue. And the particular issue is funding for solar, right? How do we get more funding? One of the, we probably all heard the saga of the Build Back Better bill that did not pass through the Senate. But one of the real tragedies of that is that they were really excellent climate provisions. The real first time the federal government really took on the climate crisis at scale, and particularly on clean energy. There were just a lot of provisions. One of those provisions would reverse those tax incentives I talked about, meaning that if you are a low-income person, you'd be able to access, you'd get a tax refund instead of just having to try to get a credit that you don't have the ability to get. Or a nonprofit organization or a city would be able to access those credits. So there's still a chance to pass at least the climate provisions of that bill. Tina Smith has been a leader on that. And this is more of a support call for her as she continues to champion this over the next month within Congress. So if you'd like to come on to that meeting, you're welcome to cheer on that champion.
Thank you for that. And also in the chat throughout the presentation, some additional links have been put. I'm going to kick it back to Kristen, who will talk a little bit more about Earth Week. But I do want to call attention to what Laura Wedge has put in there. There are a number of actions regarding solar and clean energy related to the Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan. And one of those is about the type of advocacy you've just heard about, whether that be at the hyper local school district level, the state level, or the federal level. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, but I'm going to kick it back to Kristen.
Thank you, Jodi. First off, I just want to say thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your great insights and expertise. Thank you for making such great strides to bring solar power to our community. It was really great hearing about all the different angles that we're taking it. We want to once again thank our sponsors for Earth Week. I will display them here. And last but not least, thank you all for coming and participating in our Lunch and Learn webinar on actions for solar. We hope to see you again in our other events and webinars this week. I'll display those here. Tonight, actually, you can join us for the Spring Solar Tilt at the Lincoln Park Community Solar Garden starting at 5:15 tonight. There's no registration required, so come learn how to tilt a solar panel with us. All the information for parking and location is on our website. For folks interested in taking action, we encourage you to go online to the Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan, where you'll find recommended actions and steps that will support the development of an equitable and sustainable future in Duluth. I know Laura sent some links in there, as us joining a solar buy is one of those actions. And join us in our Day of Climate Action, Friday, April 22nd. That is Earth Day. So now we will open the floor for questions. Please feel free to drop any questions in the chat or unmute, and we can discuss solar.
That is the end of our formal presentation. We're a little bit over, so thank you for those that are able to join us. But if anybody does want to stick around, kind of what we miss when we don't meet in person is the ability just to kind of stand in the hallway and talk with the cool kids. So if there's any cool kids that want to stick around with some questions, please unmute yourself. And this is more meant to be a free-flowing conversation for anybody that's able to stick around.